Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with our folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please leave a rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Central Michigan Chippewas, who finished 5-7 and recently wrapped up their 2024 spring practice on April 13th. Please welcome to the show our guest, Adam Jaksa, voice of the Central Michigan Chippewas. He can be found on X at Adam Jaksa. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Happy to talk some football here in the summertime.
Yeah, football never ends, and I don't know about that intro video for you, but seeing that Oklahoma State Hail Mary again brings back some fun memories.
You know, I actually just bought a box. I just recently changed apartments, and I had to find a box that fit all my credentials. And I had to make sure that the Oklahoma State, because if you go back and watch the clip you guys played, there's some little nerdy skinny kid that's got a camera right next to the pylon where we score, and that was me watching that game almost 10 years ago. So I just was reminiscing about that great moment. And of course, when we went there a couple of years ago, you just remember everything that happened that day in 2016.
Awesome. Hey, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what led you into sports media business and becoming the voice of the Central Michigan Chippewas?
Yeah, sure. I think it's similar to a lot of people. I grew up with a sports family. My mom and dad were very active and competed in sports. And then my dad coached me, and I have a couple older sisters in sports. And there was always a game on at our house. If there wasn't a game on at our house, we were going to a game, playing in a game, watching a game. And I grew up, in the heart of East Lansing. So we had a divide, Michigan on one side of the family, Michigan State on the other. So I remember watching college football, and there's a lot of great universities in the state of Michigan, and it just the Midwest is filled with football, and then you think basketball and baseball and all the sports. So kind of grew up into it, and then as many realize pretty early for some, it's not going to be in your future playing wise. So the next best thing I always thought was being able to talk about it and hearing the voices or seeing the individuals that were calling the games and thinking, how in the world do you get a job like that? That seems like a ton of fun. So I went up to Central Michigan, and I did play Division III soccer at Trine in the state of Indiana for 1 year, and realized that was not going to pan out for me. And Central Michigan was a program that I'd done some camps up there for baseball and basketball, and had been on the campus, and I'd heard about the broadcasting program. So ended up going there and got great experience at Central Michigan on air as a student. They let you get on air pretty much right away. And then almost right after my graduation, I got called back. That's when the MAC signed the deal with ESPN to do ESPN3 games, which was super fortunate. So they brought me back to do all of their ESPN3 volleyball, wrestling, gymnastics, men's, women's basketball. And that was in 2014. And so far, they haven't kicked me out yet, and they've added, football and basketball on the radio side, and many other duties as well. So that's kind of a compilation of how I've come to Central Michigan and stayed at Central Michigan.
So in the beginning, I talked about wrapping up the spring practice. Usually, I'm saying wrapping up the spring game. Can you talk to us a little bit about why there was a practice instead of maybe a game?
Yeah, Coach Mack has never been one to have a spring game in general. They do some scrimmage stuff, but they never declare it as an actual game. This year, even more so, though, they were banged up, like the offensive and defensive lines. You guys know how it is. Sometimes you don't have the numbers depth-wise to even go 11 on 11. So they did a couple of scrimmages, but there wasn't any real big game-like feel to it. And that's common, I think, sometimes. And that was just this year with their numbers, that they had some nicks and dings, and they didn't want guys out there that could potentially further injure or weren't quite 100% healthy. So they wrapped everything up. I think they were good about getting opportunities for the guys to get out there, a couple of new coaches on the staff, and just getting back on the field after what was a tough year last year for them.
Speaking of last year, they lose last season's offensive coordinator, Paul Petrino, who ended up resigning. We assume that head coach Jim McElwain kind of will assume those responsibilities as well as the play calling in 2024. And while we expect that his handprints and fingerprints were all over the offense previously, with him kind of calling all the shots, are there any changes you think or tweaks we can expect to see?
Yeah, I think certainly Coach Mack is always going to have a say. He's an offensive guy, and he's very in tune to that. Jake Costner is the quarterback coach that's back for a second year. He runs a lot of the offense, so I don't think that's necessarily going to be a huge change. And that was last year as well. He's got an inkling for what's going on and is making some play calls, and I expect that he's probably going to be doing that similar role again this year. Obviously no Coach Petrino, so you won't have an influence from him, but they added a new wide receivers coach in Coach Sherman. I'm sure he could potentially have some say. They haven't really come out the last couple of years and said, hey, this is our offensive coordinator. So my guess, and just kind of what I've seen, is it's more of a collab effort with everybody kind of getting a say. But I know last year that Jake was the guy they brought in to help add some stuff and make some of the calls down there once it was game time. So I would imagine he's going to be similar in that role again this year.
Central Michigan's offense seemed to struggle a little bit there in 2023, which is kind of out of character for them. But in 2023, they ranked 98th in total offense, averaging 344 yards per game. But let's get to the, place where it all starts, that position in quarterback. They're going to have a new starter in 2024. Last year starter Jason Bowers moved on to Sam Houston, but they return Burt Emanuel Jr., who did start a few games the last 2 years, and then they bring in Joe Labus from Iowa. How do you think that QB room shakes out?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I know that everybody in Mount Pleasant is they're asking the same questions as you, Luke. They want to know who's going to be starting at quarterback. And I think, unfortunately, the question that I have, or the answer that I have, is I don't know. That's a competition that is going to go on through fall camp. Coach Mack is not going to tip his hand, just like he didn't last year as well. We had no idea going into the Michigan State game down in East Lansing to open the year who was playing quarterback, and it was Burt Emanuel Jr. to open the game. So he's pretty tight-lipped about it. I imagine he'll be the same this year, but I would guess they want it to be Burt Emanuel Jr. I mean, he's arguably the best or one of the best athletes in the MAC. I mean, when he's got the ball, all eyes are on him, but he's struggled throwing. He's made some throws, but obviously that's the weak point. He's got a little hitch in his throw. He's been intercepted. He's missed some guys that have been open. It's just not your prototypical quarterback. He's got the athlete side. Now can he add the passer side at a more consistent rate? And then for the Iowa transfer, Labus that comes in, I think they like what they got there. I think that's a good competition. He made some plays in spring ball. He certainly bulks up the depth chart there. And as you mentioned, Jace Bauer's not there. Like they thought maybe that Jace would come back and it would be him and Burt Emanuel Jr. again battling for that spot. He moves on and they bring in Labus. So I think it's an open competition. I think it's very healthy to have both of those guys, both that have experience. And that's a position that's got to be better, though. I mean, the last time that they were effective, Daniel Richardson, a few years ago, he was great at the quarterback position. And, when CMU's been good, their offense has been humming under Coach Mack. So the quarterback position is obviously going to be extremely important to their success this season.
So you talked about the development as a passer that Burt needs to develop. What have you seen or heard lately about that development and how that's going?
I think it's a work in progress. I know, again, Chippewa fans would like to hear that it's 100% solved, but it's a guy that's young. and that has not had a ton of college game reps. So you can see he's working on it. There's some times where he makes some really good throws. There's some times where you see the inconsistencies in there with some of his throws. So I am really interested as they get through spring ball and he continues to improve, or as he moves through the summer ball here and gets to fall camp. What does he do between now and fall camp to continue growing with throwing the football? Because again, I don't think it's a guaranteed thing that he's going to go through fall camp and he is the guy. I think it's going to be a true open competition, and it's whoever's playing better, who's moving the offense more efficiently, who's helping the team score points. That's always been the thing that Coach McElwain has said. That's going to factor who is going to be the starter come the start of the season.
And they've got a true freshman and an early enrollee at the quarterback position, and Jaden, is it Glazer, I believe.
Glasser, yep.
Glasser. What do you think his play? How could you describe his play style to people that might not be familiar with him or his game?
Yeah, he's good. I was impressed by him the couple of times I saw him in spring ball. I mean, he can throw the football and he can move. And I think that's what you want right now in college football. If you have a guy that can throw the football and he can move around a little bit in the pocket and then he can get outside of it, extend plays, that's going to add an extra element to your offense. So he's super young. It's very important for him to come in early as an early enrollee and kind of get the offensive side of things, get to know Jake, the quarterback's coach, get to build that chemistry with the offensive players and the quarterbacks that he's working with. But I don't know if he's going to be able to win the job over a couple of experienced guys that have been in college football and one that has already spent an entire season in this offense. But again, we got a long time between now and fall, so I wouldn't put it out of the question. But I was impressed the couple of times that I saw him. I think he could be a really good college quarterback at this level.
Moving over to that running game, which seemed to be come on really strong towards the end of the 2023 season, with Marion Lukes leading the way. Lukes returns, as well as Miles Bailey and BJ Harris. How did the running back group look in the spring?
Yeah, they look really good. I mean, that's one of the strengths of this Chippewa team. It has been the last couple of years. But one of the downfalls of that is, you guys know, you're not going to be able to run the football if the offensive line is not good. And CMU has really struggled in that department. And when you think back of Central Michigan football and the history, it is known as O-line U. I mean, there are so many great offensive linemen that come through here. They call themselves the Bubs. It's a tradition. I mean, there's one pick in the Mid-American Conference that's gone first overall ever, and it was an offensive lineman from Central Michigan, Eric Fisher, back in 2013. I mean, this is CMU football, the offensive line, the Bubs, and the physicalness, the toughness mentality that they have shown in the past with this program. I don't know if they lost it the last couple of years or what was going on, but it did not look the same, and CMU was not able to run the ball as effectively. And you got two backs that were really good. The M&M boys and Miles Bailey and Marion Lukes, as you mentioned, they've both had great moments and have put together a couple of seasons that you would say, hey, they should be set in the run game. And then you add BJ Harris, who's got great talent from Missouri. I mean, you're kind of licking your chops going into last year and the ground attack, thinking this should be an ease into a new quarterback, whether it was Bauer or whether it was Emmanuel Jr. And this should give the team an opportunity to lean on the run game before, you figure out who that passing threat is or what your identity is throwing the football. But that wasn't the case. Again, there was a lot of times where there wasn't a ton of time to throw, or there are backs getting the football that they didn't have a chance to make a move because guys were in the backfield. So, there's good players on the other side too, but we've been so accustomed to the offensive line being the strength of this team. That is certainly going to be a key factor in 2024 of if CMU can get back to where they expect to be, which is at the top of the conference. But if they can, and if those guys are willing to work and continue growing, I mean, take your pick for one of those three there in Lukes, Bailey, or Harris. I think they are all very capable of having a big season.
speaking of a big season, like I mentioned, Luke's kind of came on really strong towards the end of last year. Was that more of an approach that you think of playing the hot hand, or he just was that much better than the other guys? And do you think maybe he can continue that play going into next year, maybe be the next 1,000-yard back for Central Michigan?
I think he's capable. I think him and Miles Bailey are 1A and 1B. Like, they both have spurt ability moments where more so at the beginning of the season, it was Miles Bailey that was the guy. And then, as you mentioned, at the end, Luke started to come on. So both have had great runs, great games, great moments, but we haven't seen it for a full season. So I don't know who it would be, but I think either one of them could be that next 1,000-yard back. And again, like, it's not easy, guys, to come in and transfer and be productive right away. When you're changing setting, you're a young individual, you're in a new offense, you're kind of getting your environment down. BJ Harris, I think, could potentially be that guy too. I mean, those three for sure are the guys this year, and you hope that all three can stay healthy because I think they complement themselves really well. It's just about now who's going to be the guy, that consistently play 12 games and he's going to rush for, 100 to 150 yards a game, and he can be our reliant back. And Jim McElwain has always, since he got here in 2019, he's had a couple of backs in there just to spell the other guy. You can't just have one guy do the entire workload. So I think there's plenty of carries to go around for 2, even 3, maybe more, if guys can step up and show that they deserve to be out there on the field.
Speaking of stepping up, Luke's, Bailey, and Harris are kind of the elder statesmen in that running back room. Are there any younger guys that we should know about in that running back room?
Your guess is as good as mine, because again, the focal point is those three, and there's, from what we've seen, there's those three, and then there's the rest of the backs, and that's just on experience, that's on talent. Those guys have showed on Saturdays or Tuesdays, Wednesdays, whenever you're watching midweek action, they've been the best option. So I think that it's a very talented group. Again, I would put the running backs up there as one of the strengths of this team. They have been the last couple of years, but it's to be determined who else can step up and be that next guy if need be, because I think there certainly are options on the roster.
And the Chippewas returned just about everyone in terms of their top pass catchers from 2023, including their wide receivers in Tyson David, Jace Pruitt III, Chris Parker, and Stephen Bracey Jr. How did that group look, and what kind of production can we expect from the group here in 2024?
Yeah, again, I think that's another strength this year. That was last year in a spot where you weren't sure what you were going to get. You had lost some big talent, and you're trying to find new guys to step into those roles. But those three you're talking about, Jesse Pruitt, Tyson Davis, Chris Parker, they had some special moments last year. And when you're breaking in a new quarterback, you don't have a run game that has been sustainable, and you have new pass catchers, some guys are going to have to step up. And those guys showed that they can step up. Now it's the same thing we're talking about with the running backs. Can you do it for a full season? Stephon Bracey kind of fought through injuries throughout the year. He's the speedster. He's kind of the break it over the top guy that they certainly would like to be a big play threat, because again, that's been a massive part of Coach Mack's offense is the balance, right? You want to run it, you want to throw it, but at the end of the day, when they're seeping up, when the backers, when the DBs are coming up closer to the line, you want to be able to shoot it over the top with a guy that's got speed. And Bracey, they thought was going to be that guy last year, and it didn't end up working out that way. So if he can stay healthy, and again, maybe it takes a second year for him to kind of find his role as he transfers in from Wisconsin and comes back home to the state of Michigan, I think any four of those guys could really have big years. And that's a big asset for whoever does win the starting quarterback job, knowing that you've got experience and guys that have shown we can go out there and make plays through the air.
Last season, the tight ends weren't a big part of the passing game. They do lose Mitchell Collier to graduation, but return to Corian Temple, who saw time last year as a redshirt freshman. How did the tight end unit look in the spring, and do you think they can be utilized more in the passing game in 2024?
Yeah, I think that's a big addition that they need, right? They need some tight end production. They love using the tight end. Again, being an offensive line and a team that can, and a program that can run the football, the tight end has always been important here in Mount Pleasant. And there's been some good ones. So you mentioned Corian Temple. Again, I know I probably am sounding like I'm repeating myself over and over here, but it's an opportunity for him to have a big season. He's had moments, he's had flashes. He went through an injury a couple of years ago. He played well last season in moments, but they need to find that number one pass catcher at the tight end spot. And he returns with experience. He continues to add size and get better and better. And he's shown that he's one of their more athletic tight ends that they have. I think he's certainly a guy to watch out for. Jacob Kaminsky also is a guy that they brought in late last year. He saw some playing time, didn't catch a lot of footballs, but he's a raw talent with great upside that they think can add. So I think those are two right away that I think of who could be, the next guy to contribute as a tight end through the air, because you'll talk to him and it's like, yeah, the tight end's main responsibility though is to block. We need to be able to block first, and then the next part is the pass catching threat, but certainly that's an element of their offense that they want to get back to this year.
So we kind of touched on that offensive line earlier, but it loses two starters in Keegan Smith and Deontay Powell-Woods and a key backup in Cade Klimzak. They do return 2023 starters in Braden Swarout and Dominique Serpilia the third, and Davin Heinzen. What did Central Michigan do to fill those vacated spots, and how did that unit look?
Yeah, again, this was part of the little banged up nicks and dings during spring ball, so I didn't see a ton of what that unit is going to potentially look like. In terms of what they've done, though, I know they've added a couple of pieces. Jameel Jackson is a transfer that they brought in from Fort Valley State. He's a 3-year starter coming in. They also brought in Luis Martinez, who's coming over from West Liberty University. He played 15 games over the last couple of years and started all 10 games last year. So I like the depth that they've added. And then the big thing is just going to be, can they get back to that nastiness of Central Michigan offensive linemen that they've had in the past, being able to dictate and take over games when you need to run the football to sustain a drive and to keep your defense off the field and start to wear down the opposing defense. That's when they've been good as a program. And even under Jim McElwain, when you go back to 2019 and to 2021, their two best years that they've had under him, they had a great offensive line and they were able to run the football. So I think the addition of those two new pieces, without knowing what they're going to look like in the mix, are going to add some good depth. And then you've got a lot of offensive linemen that have experience, that got some time either last year or a couple of years before this year coming up, that should make that a group that's going to have potential to succeed here in 2024.
Do you think that like having those transfers come in and then not having a spring game, that there's a detriment at all of kind of getting that cohesiveness gel together? Or do you think they can build that up during practice where you can kind of figure out what the guy to the left and right of me is doing and you kind of preserve that health with not having that spring game? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's always good to have a spring game. I mean, in terms of like the cohesion and what it's going to be like, you want to get as much practice and reps as you can that are going to coincide with what game action is going to look like. But again, spring game hasn't been, spring game hasn't really been the MO here in Mount Pleasant since Coach Mack has been here. They have scrimmages and they have a couple of those in spring ball, but the main thing again is technique and getting the guys out there, going through the drills, building the chemistry with each other, of being around the group. I think those things are really important. And then you can all come together in fall camp. You get a full month after you've gone through all of your workouts and strength and conditioning stuff that you did in the summer. So yeah, I think certainly it's important to get those game-like reps, and you'd love to have 5 guys that are going to be your starters heading into 2024. But they don't have that, and they weren't going to have that regardless of if they had a game or not. So I certainly think it's capable of that group coming together. And that's just kind of the hands that they've been dealt here for spring ball and then moving forward to the fall.
If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
I would say Chris Parker. He came on last year, very athletic, and he made some great catches throughout the season. And they need pass catchers to step in. When they lost Ja'Cory Sullivan and Khalil Pimpleton, the two Muskegon boys from a couple of years ago, there was a definite hole in the offense because those were two reliable pieces that if they needed a big play or if they needed to, get some positive yards back, they knew number 11 or number 88 were making a play through the air. I think Chris Parker has that ability. I think it's also going to be, the offense isn't just one piece, right? It's not just one receiver can be good. It's got to be, you got to give your quarterback time to throw. Your quarterback then has to execute and hit that wide receiver in the numbers. Then your wide receiver has to catch it. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But if the offense can find its groove again here in 2024, I think Chris Parker is going to have a massive year for Central Michigan.
All right, moving over to the defensive side of the ball, let's start with the defensive line. They lose Jaquez Bristol, Quandario Lee, Maurice White, and Robbie Stewart, but return Jason Williams, Michael Heldman, Jonah Pace, and others. How did that group look this spring? What did you hear about that group in the locker room? And then is there a player you expect to kind of stand out this fall?
Yeah, are you talking player to stand out on the defensive line or just defense in general?
Defensive line.
Defensive line, I think it starts with Michael Heldman. I mean, they love his motor. He was a little dinged up in spring ball, so I didn't see him a ton because that's a guy that they want fully healthy coming into the fall. But he was that end piece that they felt going into last year could be the replacement for some of the guys that they've had since Coach Mack and Rob Akey now, who's been here for 6 years since Coach Mack got here as the DC. They feel like Michael Heldman's that next guy. And we saw it at spurts for last year from Michael. Again, it's can we see it every game? Can we see it every quarter? Can we see it every play where he's able to force some issues for the opposing quarterback? Because that was a weakness last year. They didn't get as much pressure. They didn't force as many turnovers. And then you look at the numbers on the back end. Well, the numbers don't look as good from the defensive backs because there wasn't as much pressure up front. So I know that's certainly a key for them heading into 2024. We've got to get pressure on the quarterback. And I think Michael Heldman can be that guy. Again, they also they added one new piece from Garden City CC and Highland CC. I don't know how to say his name yet. Pius Ajugo. That's what I'm going to throw out there. Pronunciations, we usually do those in the fall. We haven't got a chance to talk to these guys yet, but adding more depth, just as they did on the offensive line, I think is only going to help the pieces that they have come back. But I do like the experience that they've got back because they did lose the members you're talking about, but they also had new faces that were thrust into more pivotal roles last year that should pay benefits this year where they're going to step into more of a role. Now it's just finding that one or two edge rushers or defensive tackle that can get to the quarterback consistently. That makes a huge, huge difference for a Rob Akey defense that he's aggressive. He likes to blitz. He likes to bring pressure. But if you can sit back in man-to-man defense or zone defense and you can rely on one or two defensive tackles or defensive linemen rather to go get pressure, it makes things a lot more complicated for the offense that's trying to score points on the other side against you.
Moving over to the linebackers, you lose leading tackler Kyle Moretti, but return Dakota Cochran and Justin Whiteside. How did the linebacking group look in the spring?
It looked good. This is another one that you look at the strength of both units. You think one running backs, wide receivers, and there's potential for more. Defensively, it's the linebackers, and the linebackers have been stacked for a couple of years now. They've done a really good job of building the depth. So, I mean, Kyle Moretti was so good. He's fun to watch, kind of that old school football player that he flew around and he was tough. He was in your face. He made the plays that he needed to. He was a great leader, and they loved him. He moves on, and now there's guys that are almost just as good or just as athletic, ready to go. I mean, Dakota Cochran was outstanding last year. He's maybe the most athletic of the group. I would expect him to have a big year. But then you get Jordan Kwiatkowski, Fernando Sanchez III, and a couple others that made some big plays and had some moments as well. So linebacking, I would say, is the strength coming into 2024 for this defense under Rob Akey.
Speaking of the linebacker, you bring in Notre Dame transfer Nolan Ziegler, who I guess just adds to an already strong room. He was a kind of a high-level recruit for Notre Dame. What do you think we can expect for him in 2024?
Well, he's got to earn his spot. I mean, you said it. That group is talented, and I don't think Ziegler's any shake either. I mean, I think he's gonna be good, but he's got to come in and he's got to earn it because that room is loaded with talent. And to be able to get a guy with that caliber that maybe didn't have the success at Notre Dame that he was hoping to and hopes to have more success in the MAC, I think that's going to be an asset to bring him in. And we'll see how he fits in because that group is so fun to watch. They fly around, and I'm really excited to see how they come together, even without Kyle Moretti, who's a big loss. And man, he was such a great guy, great leader. That unit should be set, and I expect them to help carry the defense. And we talked about, guys, you find your identity early in the season. It's tough for these mid-major teams because you're playing San Diego States and Illinois and, last year, Power 5 teams. You're going to Michigan State, Notre Dame. It's tough to kind of build your identity when you're playing teams that have a ton of athletes and are expected to win those games. But that's when you got to make your headway before you head into conference play. And I think the linebackers are going to be ahead of the curve coming in terms of this team, this unit, finding out who they are. They know who their linebackers are and the talent that they have in that room.
Do you think is it too early, or did someone kind of step up to kind of fill Moretti's role in the middle, or you think that's still kind of be determined in fall camp?
Yeah, I think it's Dakota Cochran. I mean, there were moments last year where Kyle was injured. He went down for a few games, and the toughness for that kid to come back and play through his injury was remarkable. Just shows you the competitor that he was. But Dakota Cochran flies around, guys. If you haven't seen number 11, you need to watch this dude because he can move laterally. He can get you. He's physical. He can stuff a hole. I think he's that guy that fills in. And don't sleep on Jordan Kwiatkowski. He may be the biggest hitter in the linebacker room that we have. And when he thumps you, you can hear it up from the press box at Kelly Short Stadium. So I think those two guys are certainly going to be 1A, 1B. Cochran was kind of the starter last year when Moretti went out, but Kwiatkowski was the main backup to come in as well to shore things up in the middle.
In terms of that returning depth in the defensive backfield, it seems to have taken a big hit, losing leading tackler Trey Jones, Javarius Sims, Lavario Wiley, and DeJavian Stepney. They do return Deontay Kent, Caleb Spann, Deron McKine, and Elijah Rickard, and some others. But they also bring in a quarterback from Iowa in Brennan DeFernandez. What can we expect from that group here in 2024?
Yeah, certainly Trey Jones is a huge loss. I mean, they loved him. He's a great leader, and he just been around, right? He was a guy that loved Coach Mack, and he comes up from Alabama, and it feels like he'd been here since Coach Mack had been here. So to lose him is certainly, going to be tough, but I think it's a group similar to what we're talking about with the defensive line, where you lose some guys, but then you've got other guys that last year had to step in and fill some roles. Now it's the DB's turn where they've got guys that can fill in the roles of the guys that have left who had experience last year, but they maybe weren't your starters at times. I think there's opportunity there for them to be a better unit. Dante Kent is a leader back there. He's been in Mount Pleasant now and heading into his senior year. Lockdown corner, vocal, a guy that they're going to rely upon. I thought Deron McKinney took a big step forward last year. He made some big plays for CMU when they were searching and trying to find a corner that could defend because, again, they got picked apart at times because quarterbacks, I think back to Sam Hartman sitting in the pocket all day in South Bend, and I think their first two touchdowns were 75-plus yards. And you're looking going, what's going on with the cornerbacks? Well, the quarterbacks got all kinds of time to throw, and Notre Dame's got great athletes on the outside. So that is a part of the defense that's got to come together, where we talked about it. You got to get some rush. You got to be able to help guys out. But those were moments last year for like a Deron McKinney, who's experiencing things for the first time in Mount Pleasant. He's back this year. He's got some experience under his belt. Dante Kent has been here to add some of that knowledge of what it's like to compete under Rob Akey's defense. And again, they also added a couple of pieces. You mentioned the transfer from Iowa, but they went and got, I think it's Ja Returner from Albany State. He's coming in, and Akeem Snell from St. Francis as well. So you add some more pieces. Snell, by the way, he's going to fit right in. He had an interception in Waldo Stadium last year against Western Michigan. So if he wants to do that against the Broncos again this year, nobody in Mount Pleasant's going to be upset about it. So adding the depth there and bringing back some of the experience, that is going to help. But I mean, I'm with that group as a whole. They've got to be better this year in 2024 than they were last year.
Do you envision, or who do you envision kind of stepping into that Trey Jones role?
I think it's to be determined right now. Not anything that I saw in spring ball that said, hey, it's going to be this guy or it's going to be this guy. I just know in terms of the leadership role, because that was a big cog for Trey Jones. He was vocal, and the guys listened to him. They respected him. But Dante Kent has to be that guy this year. He is the leader of the defensive backs, whether he's corner, safety, it doesn't matter. Nickel, they can move him around. And I wouldn't be surprised if they put him potentially in different spots and maybe he's that guy. But I think it's too early to tell who is going to replace a guy like Trey Jones that's been here. But in terms of leadership, you're relying a lot on Dante Kent this year to step up and fill that part of the void.
If you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
Yeah, I know I mentioned his name, Jordan Kwiatkowski. I love this kid. He's a physical hitter. He was the backup linebacker last year, played in 11 games, and you saw some of it in fall camp. I remember thinking going into the season last year, who's this number 12 kid? What's his Kwiatkowski? I'm trying to figure out how to say his name and trying to get an idea of who's this dude that's laying the wood every time I come and check in practice. And it was Jordan Kwiatkowski, and he played 11 games last year, backup linebacker, I think 30 or so tackles, got to the quarterback a couple of times, had a few pass breakups. Dakota Cochran is certainly, I think, the guy that sets the standard this year, but I would not be surprised if you see number 12 on the field and key spots on key downs this year. And I think for a full season showcasing his experience, I think he's got a chance to have a really, really special 2024 season.
Now that spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you feel is the most concerning?
Yeah, I think it's just what they've struggled in the last couple of years, and it's been the offensive line. I think there's certainly potential for that group to be good this year. But I know what makes Central Michigan go. I mean, I've been watching this program since 2010, and when their offensive line is good, when they can run the football, they're good. That's what they have built their brand on. And I know that goes well beyond before I was following the program as close as I am. That's the Brian Kelly days and the Butch Jones days and the Dick Flynn days and the Herb Duramity days. I mean, you can go back. The offensive line dictates whether this program is good. And when you've got an offensive coach in Jim McElwain, and you've got an offensive league in the Mid-American Conference, you got to be able to have a good offense. And I know everybody thinks the quarterback, the running backs, yada, yada, yada. It's not the case. Everything starts up front in football. And if you can't block, you're not going to do anything else offensively. And they didn't have the consistency the last 2 years with the offensive line. I mean, you go to 2019, they had the biggest turnaround in college football. Their offensive line was outstanding. Jonathan Ward was a great rusher, and they go to the MAC championship game. 2021, some dude named Lou Nichols leads the country in rushing. Well, he leads the country in rushing because he had 2 NFL tackles that he was running behind, right? So it's going to be the offensive line. And I don't for a second question the fact that they've got a chance to be good and they can do it. But at some point, guys, we got to see it, right? Like, we haven't seen the capabilities and the consistency from that unit that we saw back in 2021, and it's been 2 years. So here we are in 2024. If that unit is good this year, watch out for CMU. They could have a special season, but we'll see.
What we talked about some of the different strengths of the team, but what would you say is the main strength of the team?
That's a good question. I would say the 2 units that I reiterated, the running backs. I mean, I love the M&M crew that they have. Miles Bailey, Marion Lukes. Those guys are tough, physical runners. They're fast. And they're 2 guys that absolutely love each other. I mean, they get in the end zone. We've started tabbing them as the M&M boys. They throw M&Ms on the sideline. It's pretty cool. So I think the cohesion collectively as a group, I mean, Coach Mack has said it the last couple of years, having the consistency of a staff. And there's been some turnover, but like Rob Akey, the defensive coordinator, has been there. Jim McElwain has been there. They've added different pieces. Like, they kind of know who they are and what they're going to get in Mount Pleasant. I think they really do enjoy each other's company. But the running back tandem is good. You add BJ Harris to that as well. That's a deep room that has got a lot of skill and talent. And then the linebackers. I mean, I'm juiced up to watch linebackers run around the field defensively. And I tell you what, I didn't grow up in the game of football loving linebackers. I mean, they're out there, but they're not the skill position that I think a lot of people look at. But when you look at CMU football, you got to pay attention to their linebacking core because there's a lot of special, talented, and athletic individuals. So I think those 2 position groups are certainly the strength heading into fall camp in this season.
So, the portal is closed, but people are still in there. They haven't all decided where they're going yet. Is there any position in particular that coach might be looking to add here? I guess this spring, summer, fall?
Yeah, I mean, I think anywhere. Talking to him a couple of weeks ago, he didn't give me anything specific, but he said, our roster is what it is right now, but we've still got opportunities to bring in new folks. That just insinuating the roster is not going to look like what it's going to look like come fall camp. So again, I don't think you can ever have enough guys up front on both sides of the ball. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go and try and pick up more offensive linemen or defensive linemen. But I think they feel good about what they have. I think that they've got a group that they liked going through spring ball. There was a lot of youth on last year's team too. So, I'm talking again, about a team that went 5-7, but they'll tell you that they did not succeed. They did not do what they were hoping to do. Well, a lot of that is because they were super young. And that starts at the quarterback position too. I mean, Bert Emanuel Jr. is coming in for the first time basically as a full season. He gets injured. Same thing with Jace Bauer, his first opportunity to kind of command the offense after they made the switch to go to him. Like, those are spots that are really, really pivotal in games where you need your playmaker, your quarterback, to make a play, and they're out there doing it for the first time. And it's not just the quarterback. It was all over the field with that.
And I talked about maybe some transfers that are coming in, but sometimes you also have to keep the players that you do have so they don't go into the portal. How has NIL and the transfer portal impacted Central Michigan that you've been able to see?
Yeah, I think it's made it even more challenging than it already is, right? I mean, there's so many great football schools in America. I mean, you could go anywhere. And now the fact that you're adding compensation to it, I mean, I don't know about other spots, but there's not just money all over the place in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, right? So if other schools have the resources and somebody or individuals have a great year, they're getting looked at by other schools. And if they want to go benefit from the way that they played, I mean, guys, how can you blame them, right? If you have a great season and you don't know you're going to be an NFL star, who doesn't want to go make money for being good at something, right? That's kind of the way the world works. So There are opportunities, I think, for some small NIL stuff here in Mount Pleasant. But at the end of the day, again, our resources are kind of limited. We're a group of 5 school, and there are other schools out there with more resources. So, I mean, look at a guy like Trey Jones, right? Like Trey Jones has a great season. He's been in Mount Pleasant. He's got 1 more year of eligibility, and he's down in the SEC. And if he wasn't going to Texas A&M, there were other SEC schools that were looking at him. We've had that happen multiple times. What I will say is I've been really impressed by the way that Coach Mack and this program have been able to keep individuals that have those opportunities. Like Lou Nichols has a heck of a year in 2021. I think there are many schools that would have loved to have the nation's leading rusher come down and be a part of their program. He stayed. There are moments like that where you're really impressed with. You simply just don't have someone offers you a bunch of money and CMU can't match it. Those individuals are electing to turn down that money to stay at that school because they like the program, they like the coaching staff, they like the community, and they like the facilities that are there. I still think that is important. But at the end of the day, if someone wants to go get money and go to a Power 5 school, you can't blame them. You thank them for their time and you wish them well, but that's just how college athletics works now. And you guys get it. Like, it was already difficult for group of 5 schools anyway, right? The gap has been getting bigger and bigger. Like, you guys showed a clip of CMU beating Michigan State back in 2009. Like, CMU's beaten Michigan State 3 times, but guess what? They haven't beat them in over a decade, right? Those wins came back in 91 and 92 and then 2009. And you had guys like Dan Lefevre and Antonio Brown and others that were on that team, right? Like, those guys now, they get an opportunity to come to school. Who knows how many seasons we get Antonio Brown for? Who knows how many seasons we get Dan Lefevre for? You may get them for a year and then they're gone because they're going to go make some money and you can transfer right away. So I think the gap is widening in college athletics. And I think in terms of looking at it from a glass half full perspective, it's even more impressive for me to see CMU still succeed and keep some of these guys and still continue to find talent with how easy it is for these guys to potentially go somewhere else where they may have opportunities that they wouldn't quite get here at CMU.
Does Central Michigan have a collective or anything built? And if so, like, when did that kind of start?
Yeah, they've got resources for the student athletes, like kind of an NIL page where you can create your profile and people have an opportunity to donate to you. It started, I want to say it's been up for a couple of years and they're certainly open to it. But again, how much money are you going to get from that? Where it's not like freshmen are getting an opportunity to come in here and they're just going to get handed a bunch of money when they haven't even played here before, right? Where other schools maybe have the opportunity to just give them money before they've even put the uniform on. I mean, these guys are in the transfer portal now, and they're demanding $1 million plus to come there based on what they've done at another school. I mean, CMU and a lot of these other group of 5 schools, I would imagine, they just don't have the resources to do that. So, but there certainly are opportunities if you come to CMU that they want you to promote yourself. They want you to be able to take advantage of doing whatever you do well, so that you can make money off of it.
So, with NIL, the transfer portal, coaches having to, recruit, high school kids, kind of re-recruit their own roster to try to retain them, fundraising, all these things kind of going on. It kind of seems like, the trend is that the head coach is really becoming more of a CEO or general manager, so to speak, and he may not be as involved in the X's and O's. Do you see that trend kind of happening there at Central Michigan?
Certainly see a CEO role, but Coach Mack had that, I think, when he came in, right? I mean, you've been a head coach at 2 different spots. You've been out to Colorado State, and then you go down to the SEC at Florida, and then you're, still at other opportunities as an assistant at Louisville, at Michigan State, at Michigan. I mean, he's been around the game of football for like 40 years now. So I think he's earned the role of being able to be that CEO type where he can just hire good people underneath of him and he can kind of oversee what a program looks like because he's seen it at so many different places. In terms of hands-off for the X's and O's, I'm not in there for everything, but man, I know that man is very, very linked in with what's going on the field. And he takes it extremely personal when his teams aren't winning. So I think it's kind of a combo. I mean, he works hard. So I think he's certainly delegating a lot, but I also think he's very tied in with what's going on in the X's and O's and making sure that things are looking good. And he's got a big special teams background too. So he's offensive minded, but he knows how important special teams are, obviously being great in 3 phases of the game. So I do see the CEO perspective, but he's still very much, from what I'm looking at, very involved with the X's and O's on the field as well.
How would you define success for Central Michigan football here in 2024?
I mean, I've never been a guy to run from expectations, right? I don't live my life that way, and I certainly don't want my alma mater to live their life that way. This team needs to be in the MAC championship. I mean, this program is too good of a program historically to not have a MAC title since 2009. I mean, off the top of my head, I think you can go look at all 12 teams in the MAC, and I think the only team that doesn't have a more recent MAC title is like a couple, like an Eastern Michigan or so. I mean, it's been 15 years now where different teams too, I mean, there's different teams that are winning this thing and representing the conference in that championship game. And CMU's been close. Like Jim McElwain, you thought was going to do and turn the trick all in the first year, 2019. I mean, they go into that game against Miami. If they don't lose their starting quarterback, it looks like that game is their favorite in that game. They're going to win it. And even without their starting quarterback in that game, you felt like they had a chance. It came down to a Hail Mary, I think, from midfield. And they feel they could have won that game. 2021. It's a botched snap against Northern Illinois on the last play of the game for about like a 35 or 40-yard field goal for a guy in Marshall Meter who had nailed pretty much every kick that year. If that botched snap on that field goal doesn't happen, you're looking at a team that's representing the MAC West in the MAC championship game. This program belongs in the MAC championship game. There's too much success historically, and they have great facilities. They have a brand new football building. They have the biggest video board in the MAC. They have a ton of people that absolutely adore and are passionate about this program for them not to be at the top of the conference. So you asked me 2024, what's the expectation? It's the same goals that I assume they're going to, when they go into the huddle each time in fall camp, MAC champs. Like that is the expectation. You have got to be at the top of your conference. And they don't have an easy schedule. Like they have a very difficult schedule coming up. But again, Central Michigan football is known to be one of the best in this conference. And it's been over 15 years since they've gotten a title. That's got to be the expectation heading into the season.
So we've talked a lot of things about Central Michigan today: offense, defense, some coaching changes and stuff, NIL. Is there anything that we haven't talked about for this 2024 Central Michigan Chippewas football team that you think we should know or like to share with us?
Yeah, I think just kind of there at the end, what I mentioned with the schedule. I mean, I am very curious to see, one, can they get things turned around here in 2024? Because I do think they have a lot of talent. I know I'm biased because I see them compete all the time and I call their games, but they've got a lot of talented individuals on this roster. And it's going to be now about, can it all mesh together? Can the offense find its footing that it was able to a couple of years ago? Can the defense start to get some pressure and force some turnovers? Can special teams execute that way it needs to? But then on top of that, guys, look at their schedule. Look at the teams that they have to play this year in the conference. And I'm not talking about non-conference where they have to go to Illinois and they host San Diego State and they go down to FIU. Those games will be difficult in themselves. But the conference slate, right? This is the first year where we don't have the MAC West and the MAC East. It's just the MAC. They host Ohio. Ohio was in the MAC championship game a couple of years ago. They have to go down to the defending MAC champs and Miami. You guys will do the preview. Maybe you already have done it with Miami. Miami's bringing a ton back. I mean, I'm sure they're going to be the odds-on favorite to win this league. Bowling Green has taken a huge step forward under Scott Loeffler. They have to play Bowling Green this year up in Mount Pleasant. And you could argue Toledo has been the most consistent and most talented team in this league for over a decade. They have to go to the Glass Bowl this year and play Jason Candle and Toledo. And then the one that, again, for whatever reason, they have not been able to solve, Western Michigan is on their schedule. Guys, the last time that CMU beat Western Michigan in Mount Pleasant was 2010. They have lost 7 straight to the Broncos, their arch rival in Mount Pleasant, and they've lost 10 of the last 13 against the Broncos. So on top of trying to take a step forward, you have an extremely difficult schedule that you've been tabbed with here in the fall. So there's going to be no excuses or, well, they had this go right. Like, if they turn it around and have a great season, they will have truly earned it for some of the difficult opponents that are on their schedule. And it's May right now. I can't wait to find out. I can't wait to see the fall and for it to get here, and we'll see what happens.
Well, the way you're talking about the team gets me jacked up, and I can't wait here for fall ball and everything to get going. But we want to thank you, Adam, for sharing your time and knowledge about the Chippewas with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much. And if everything I said is completely inaccurate come fall, I'm sorry.
If you're watching on YouTube and have not already, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.
1, 2, 5 Central Township, fight for victory. 5 Central Township, we're with you, varsity, rah, rah, rah.